Good afternoon, everyone. I am Joel Fishman, President of the Public Diplomacy Council of America. It is my privilege to welcome you today to the June 2024 First Monday Forum, brought to you by PDCA, the USC Annenberg Center on Communication Leadership and Policy, and the George Washington University Institute for Public Diplomacy and Global Communication. Today, we feature the 4 recipients of PDCA's 2024 Awards for Excellence in Public Diplomacy. Since 1993, PDCA and its predecessor organizations have recognized the outstanding work conducted by members of the Foreign Service, Civil Service, locally employed staff, and those who support our valuable work at binational centers, American Corners, and the many organizations that facilitate public diplomacy and mutual understanding. We take great pride in showcasing the innovative work of these contemporary practitioners and the promise they hold for the future of public diplomacy. Today is their opportunity to tell their stories. The moderator for today's program is PDCA's Program Committee Co-Chair, Joan Maurer. This is Joan's last program as co-chair. She'll be stepping down for a well-deserved respite, but her skill will be well displayed today. Our tech host is Gabby Stahl, PDCA Tom Tuck Graduate Fellow, who also did much of the program preparation. PDCA Vice President, Ambassador Larry Wallers, will close the program today. Special kudos to all the members of PDCA's Awards Committee and its co-chairs, Ambassador Tony Wayne and Michael Korf. Ambassador Wayne is an official election observer in Mexico and cannot be with us today. Michael Korf is with us, and I now turn the program over to him. Mike, it is all yours.
Thank you, Joel. Each year, we review nominations submitted by colleagues and supervisors of PD officers and staff from around the world. The committee's work is never easy because there are so many outstanding examples of the way America's public diplomacy practitioners represent our country at home and abroad. American taxpayers should be very proud of the examples we celebrate today. Wren Elhai was nominated by Ray Castillo, Director of Policy and Outreach for the State Department's Bureau of Oceans and International Environmental and Scientific Affairs. He noted that Wren assembled and led a team to increase global audiences' awareness of U.S. efforts to combat the climate crisis leading up to and during COP28, the largest and one of the most important climate change conferences in history. His team focused international attention on U.S. climate leadership and on major initiatives the U.S. delegation launched at COP28. Over to you, Wren.
Thank you, Mike. Let me just take a quick second to get some slides up. Here we are. It's an incredible honor to be with you all today and to talk to you about the work that my team here in OES, along with wonderful colleagues at Mission UAE and from other missions around the world, did around the UN Climate Change Conference last November and December, COP28. I'm hoping that this will not just give you a window into what we did in Dubai, but also offer some lessons learned and some best practices for how we can leverage major international events, especially ones where there's a significant interagency U.S. presence to achieve public diplomacy impact. And so I'll start there with a discussion of how COP28 represented a real public diplomacy challenge. First and foremost, the scale of the event and the scale of the U.S. delegation was significant and daunting. So we had over 20 U.S. government agencies. For those of you that have dealt with high-level visits and doing public diplomacy around high-level visitors in town, just to give you a taste, we had over 70 Deputy Assistant Secretary or higher principals travel to Dubai for COP28. 19 U.S. agency heads, government agency heads, several members of the cabinet, and the vice president all within a concentrated period of time, each of them with their own messages to relate, initiatives and programs to roll out, social media to create, really the whole gamut of public diplomacy needs. We also had a global audience. So while COP28 convened an incredibly large group of 80,000 plus delegates just in person in Dubai, we also had the eyes of the world on us in Dubai, and we knew there were journalists both on the ground and also internationally, and observers around the world that were trying to keep track of what was being discussed, what was being decided in Dubai, and especially interested in what sort of initiatives the United States was responsible for. And then lastly, it's fundamentally just a marathon of an event. So the COP lasted for almost 2 weeks. It went into overtime, so I think it might have hit the 2-week mark by the end of it. And every day there were reporters around looking for something, some scrap of news to report. So even though we had a big push with the vice president in town, the secretary of state in town right up front, we had to sustain our messaging and our coordination of the U.S. delegation's messaging throughout this very, very long event. So just to illustrate some of what I was just saying, here's the Vice President, Secretary of State, top right, former Secretary John Kerry, who at the time was the Special Presidential Envoy for Climate, and his Chinese counterpart here. And then we had others, John Podesta, Michael Regan, and others who visited the U.S. Center throughout the course of the 2 weeks of COP. So our goal in coordinating messaging across this vast U.S. delegation was simple. We wanted those listening, those who attended COP, those who were watching on the news or reading in the newspapers, to get a sense of what the United States was doing, why we were there, why it mattered at COP28. Not just why was the Secretary of State there, the State Department there, not just, why was this particular White House principal there, but why was the United States there with all of these different principles, with all of these different initiatives and messages to relay. And so we, assembled a team. We came up with a set of practices that we put into place. I don't have the time in this short presentation to go into everything, but for those of you who are within the State Department system, I would commend to you a cable that colleagues and I wrote after COP28 that goes into significantly more detail. But for today, I'm going to talk about just 3 of these 8 best practices and lessons learned that we drew. The first of them, this shared services model. And this is one that I really hope that the State Department will look to as a model for future major international events, especially with an extensive interagency presence. What we try to do is act as kind of a clearinghouse across the US government for certain things we knew every single one of those different agencies needed and wanted. These are things like press clips of what was going on at COP28, briefing opportunities. We had a daily press gaggle with some member of the US delegation, at least, often 2 or 3. Connections to digital influencers and content creators. So we centralized outreach to a set of Instagram and YouTube creators, and then connected members of the delegation with them as appropriate. Photography and videography services. So we knew that people were going to be looking for photos and looking for videos of the US delegation, what they were up to. And we had a contract team that we could deploy. Jay and his team did a great job kind of being the clearinghouse and triaging all of the different requests for support that we got in, both for photography and videography, as well as for interviews to support on-the-ground interviews. Importantly, we had a unified list of press contacts. And my favorite thing that we did, we had a daily email newsletter roundup that came out at the end of every day that included a prioritized set of vignettes of the top US announcements and initiatives that we were focused on that day, as well as a calendar of what events US principals would be speaking at the next day. And we sent this to list we assembled a list of about 1,500 plus, more than 1,600 by the end, of journalists and NGO observers who were following COP28 closely. And this helped us get that core key audience a sense of what is it that the United States is focused on? What do we think the news is every day of the COP? That was lesson one. Lesson two, empowering and equipping these teams. So we had, on the right here, you'll see some of those who TDY'd in to support COP28, both from Abu Dhabi, from Beijing, from Johannesburg, from Riyadh. We had a great team on the ground, but we also had a great team back in DC. So for months beforehand, we were trying to push information out, as we knew, like, these are what the priorities are going to be for this COP. This is the sort of content that would be useful to us to have. So we pushed that out to, for example, the Bureau of Global Public Affairs and their teams that put together social media content, videos. We pushed it out to PAOs in the field via a set of virtual engagements that we did with several regions. So that both our regional bureau colleagues in DC, but importantly, our colleagues out in the field would know, what is this all going to look like? What are our priorities going to be? Who are our audiences? What are we trying to accomplish? So hopefully what we did through those preparatory meetings and then on the ground pushing information back from Dubai out into the field was to give people the confidence and the materials they needed to figure out how they could amplify what was going on in Dubai to a global audience. And then lastly, you know, if anyone has ever worked a World's Fair, I had the pleasure of working Astana Expo 2017. And I know we've got great teams working towards Osaka next year, but it was kind of like that. We had this national pavilion. We had this focal point, a physical focal point at COP28, where we hosted nearly 70 events. We hosted the Senate and House congressional delegations. We hosted many of the top executive branch officials from the U.S. delegation, but also members of U.S. civil society, youth, climate policy experts and activists that could kind of convene in this space and represent physically the whole of U.S. government and whole of U.S. society commitment to climate action. So this was, this is just before the opening of the U.S. Center, when Secretary Blinken dropped by to say hello to our combined State Department climate team. So we were glad to have him there. We were glad to have many of the members of the U.S. delegation in this space. And that was really the thing that allowed us to showcase, alongside many other countries in their national pavilions, what the U.S. brought to the table. The results, I think, speak for themselves. Many of you probably saw headlines from your local papers, from national papers all around the world, on television, not just of the negotiated outcomes of COP28, but of some of the commitments and announcements and initiatives that the United States rolled out throughout the conference. So this on the left here, I pulled a page, front page from the Washington Post, that related to some of the methane and non-CO2 greenhouse gas commitments that were made. EPA rolled out a set of regulations. We held a summit with other national delegations attending the COP to focus on action on non-CO2 greenhouse gas emissions. A set of oil companies pledged their own actions to cut down on non-CO2 emissions from the oil and gas sector. So there were examples of these that were kind of intermediate stories interspersed throughout the COP. And I think we were able to get good press coverage, not just at the beginning and the end, but at some of these intermediate moments as well. I'll close with thanks for the many people that participated in this work. It was certainly not me alone, or even my team in OES and the SPEC team alone. We had, as Mike read in the citation, a group of 150 communications professionals across the US government in 20 plus different agencies that were all working together as a team, which I think is really the ideal of how we as the United States can show up to an event of the scale of a climate COP and really show that the United States, has a well-coordinated, well-strategized effort to deal with problems of this scale. So I'll close lastly by saying thank you to the Public Diplomacy Council and congratulations to all of the other awardees. It's really great to share this virtual stage with you today.
Thanks, Wren. I want to go on now to introduce Patricia Muñoz, who was nominated by Ambassador Ken Salazar, the U.S. Ambassador to Mexico. He noted that Ms. Muñoz is the senior locally employed staff media advisor at the largest U.S. consulate in Mexico. She has improved the U.S. government's use of traditional and digital media to directly counter misinformation to potential migrants, offer life-saving information and digital media to directly counter misinformation to potential migrants, and offer information about lawful immigration pathways and enhance media capacity and citizen engagement to promote transparency and good governance. Over to you, Patricia.
Thank you. And first of all, I want to thank the Public Diplomacy Council for this award. It is a true honor to receive it. I also want to express my deep gratitude to Ambassador Ken Salazar and to the Minister Counselor for Public Diplomacy, Silvio Gonzalez, and to the Public Affairs Officer here at the Consulate, Caroline Schneider, for their nomination and for their support. I was born and raised in Ciudad, Juarez, and over here, the Mexico and U.S. relationship feels like one big community. I have worked with great pride at the consulate for over 2 decades, and the consulate in Juarez, as you said, is one of the largest in the world, the largest immigrant issuance visa post in the world. But our public diplomacy unit is really small, yet powerful. We work on many issues, including economic and environmental challenges, as well as security and migration. And before I move on, I want to say that even though this is an individual award, in our small PD office in Juarez, everything we do is a team effort. So I'm going to be referring to everything as we, because all of our actions are together. We're always, I think every colleague in the team has played a part in every success that we have had. So for years, our office has focused on providing journalists with professional development courses, including English training to enhance their skills and understanding of U.S. policy. And in collaboration with the Regional English Language Officer in Mexico City and utilizing U.S. resources, we more recently developed a comprehensive curriculum that not only improved English proficiency, but also facilitated dialogue among journalists. And then we added government and civil society spokespeople into the mix. And these dialogues led to a deeper understanding of some of the challenges that this community experienced, such as migration. And we believe that listening to the different points of view of all the people that were participating served to improve communication and cooperation among them. As you know, millions of migrants are facing extraordinary challenges nowadays, risking their lives, their money, and their futures at the mercy of transnational criminal organizations. The Ciudad Juarez El Paso region, right where you see we're at the top in the map, it's a hotspot for illicit crossings of people and goods. And we witness the human toll of this reality every day. Authorities estimate that criminal groups make tens of millions of dollars monthly by smuggling migrants across the border. Migration is a global challenge, and it requires innovation and cooperation among stakeholders across jurisdictions and across countries. We believe part of the solution is to directly address those considering or already undertaking migration. Therefore, we aim to communicate directly with migrants. But first, we we had to listen carefully to their experiences and needs, and to learn a little bit of what what type of information were they requiring. In 2023, I joined a border tour for Mexican journalists that were visiting El Paso. The tour for the journalists was really eye-opening. Many of them were already covering the border from the Mexican side, but this was the first time that they got a first-hand view of the critical work that is done by Customs and Border Protection and by Border Patrol. And this experience led us to listen more closely. We realized that even these highly professional experts in listening and interpreting knew little about the US side of migration. And it made us consider what we could expect from those looking to migrate. As the United States was lifting Title 42 in 2023, thousands of migrants were approaching the border in the El Paso sector, and the US Border Patrol was recording increases in migrant encounters. It was absolutely crazy, 42,550 encounters just in April of 2023. Social media was filled with rumors. Smugglers were saying, oh, the US is granting entry to all, come on over. And we were using traditional media channels, and we were using our social media platforms, but that was not sufficient. We couldn't reach those populations on the move. It was very difficult that somebody that was traveling all the way from South America was going to be following the US Consulate in Juarez social media. Maybe they were following their mission, but they were not following what we were saying right here at the border. So we shifted our focus to WhatsApp after hearing earlier in the year from the Venezuela First Unit that they were using it for other purposes. And we went and got testimonials at different migrant shelters, mostly for messaging purposes, because we wanted to use those to start telling people in their own words what was happening, what was the reality. And when we were collecting the testimonials, we found that most migrants lacked access to TVs and radios. The local shelters that were housing thousands only had one TV, which was playing cartoons constantly because they had so many children there. People did not have radios, and the vast majority of the migrants were always on their cell phones. And that was the key. They were using their cell phones to get information. They were using cell phones to contact their families. And we also learned that basic prepaid cell phone plans in Mexico included WhatsApp without any additional charges. And this led us to take action. In April of 2023, we launched a WhatsApp broadcast list to directly connect with migrants traveling through the state of Chihuahua. Most of them were coming from southern Mexico. They were coming from Central America, from South America, but also they were coming from other regions. So we collaborated with migrant shelters, with media outlets and local authorities. We invested a few $100s, and we attracted 4,500 subscribers in the first 5 months to our WhatsApp broadcast list. And these subscribers were from every Mexican state and 17 other countries. And we know this just by the indication on where their cell phone numbers were, because we couldn't talk to them. So on October of last year, we transitioned our WhatsApp lists to the then recently introduced WhatsApp channels feature due to restrictions on broadcast lists. The channel with a very long name, Migración USA Consulado General de los Estados Unidos en Ciudad Juarez, became, in fact, the Department of State's first official WhatsApp channel verified by Meta. And I have to say, from the bottom of my heart, I have to thank Brian, Alisa, and Jane in the Bureaus of Global Public Affairs, the Office of Digital Strategy and Training, and the Western Hemisphere Affairs Office of Public Diplomacy, because without their support and guidance, we couldn't have done it. They were instrumental to what came next. Since its creation in October of 2023, the channel has experienced remarkable growth, expanding from a very modest following to right now having over 40,000 subscribers. Initially, we used it to counter disinformation spread by smugglers and criminal syndicates. But WhatsApp has also become a highly effective tool for promoting legal pathways and for discouraging irregular migration. The channel has now evolved into a comprehensive initiative for all of Mission Mexico. It has been renamed to reflect this change, and PD staff in Mexico City, Tijuana, and Juarez are now contributing content to it. And we continue to work here in the Public Diplomacy Office in Juarez, collaborating with shelters and stakeholders to promote the WhatsApp channel among newly arrived migrants. But we're also exploring other ways to communicate with them effectively. The testimonials we have collected are not only useful for messaging, but also for crafting messages that resonate with their experiences. And we're currently working with our local artists to develop a series of comic books that illustrate the consequences of irregular migration, highlight legal pathways, and depict what smugglers look like. Migration is a very complex issue, and while messaging alone cannot solve it, we will continue to put forth our best efforts to inform and to educate and to empower migrants to make informed decisions about their journeys. If you're curious about what this channel looks like, there's a QR code for you all. And thank you again for your time today.
Thank you, Patricia. Josh Lustig was nominated by Pope Thrower, Director of Public Engagement at the U.S. Embassy Seoul, where Josh led a team of 10 colleagues from the Emerging Voices and American Diplomacy House teams to develop and execute programming in support of U.S. national security priorities through engaging target audiences within collegiate and emerging professional demographics. Josh led his team to develop an innovative platform to align the next generation of Korean leaders with U.S. national security objectives and elevate these future leaders as vocal supporters. His team's American Diplomacy House Academy Youth Network model set a new standard for targeted and effective building of influential youth networks. Over to you, Josh.
Thank you so much, Michael, and thank you so much to everybody who's here today, and especially to PDCA and the fellow awardees who are here. It's such an honor. So I'm calling you straight live from Seoul, South Korea, where it is 1:30 a.m. I'm going to try my best to keep my words straight for the next 10 minutes that we're going to spend together. But if anything that I say doesn't make sense, please don't hold it against our team. You can feel free to reach out to me through the gal or at any of these Instagram handles to ask any questions or get any clarification. Great, so let's get started. My name is Josh Lustig. I'm the Public Diplomacy Officer here in Seoul, covering many things, but essentially managing a very large team that's implementing all of our youth programs, both in terms of what happens in our American Space Network and in terms of our other sort of bilateral and trilateral programs. And the program that I'm here to talk to you about today is actually something that we had never done before. That was the work of a lot of different people, excluding me, and it really changed the way that we do our business here in Seoul in terms of our programs. And so it had a really, really wide lasting impact, and hopefully maybe there's something that you can take to your post as well. Before I get started, I just wanted to really give a shout out to echo a theme that we've heard a few times from the other presenters, and really thank our team here. This was a huge undertaking that we've never done a program like this. And in fact, this involved a wholesale renovation and revamp of a lot of our American Spaces programs. And so I just wanted to thank especially Dana J, who helped to come up with this idea and really led the team before I got here. Chidin Wan, who manages the team directly now, is our first officer. Sunam An, who is the local staff supervisor, who's instrumental. Minhei Na, who answers so many emails from student participants, thousands, I think, per month. And Jin Young Lee, who runs a fair number of the many programs that you're about to learn about. I couldn't have done this. None of us could have done this without them. I think I turned my slideshow off. Okay, so basically what I'm going to start off with this proposition, this sort of problem statement, which really guided this program. And the idea was that essentially, how do you keep an American space relevant in a developed and allied country context? I'm sure many of you have been to Korea. You know that Seoul especially is one of the most connected cities on Earth. It has, I think, the highest level of internet penetration of most cities in the world. If not the most. And you'll see pictures of people using internet in the metro, which I'm sure some of our colleagues in DC. I don't know if we have that right now, but we'd love. It's very busy. It's very overworked. Koreans work some of the longest hours in the OECD, and it's a really busy and complex media environment. So the bottom right, you'll see an influencer named Tyler Rosh. He's an American who speaks Korean super well. He's known for being really smart and knowledgeable on a whole range of issues. He often gets asked by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to comment on the relationship between the US and Korea, not us. And so these are challenges that we face where we're trying to get the attention of people in a very complicated and very busy space. And we're trying to do that with a physical space that is a little bit modeled on kind of an outdated model, at least in terms of the challenges that we're facing. So I don't know if you're familiar with this idea of supporter cohorts, but this is very big in places like Korea. And it's this idea that you get a bunch of young people who are interested. They're somewhere between like intern and internet fan. And they come together through a competitive application process, and they essentially agree to spend some time supporting your organization's programs, promoting it on social media, attending, and telling all of their friends. The one that you're seeing here is actually one run by the Korean Ministry of Foreign Affairs called Moparang, means with MOFA, and they're quite successful. They cover our events as well. And so we were trying to think, what if we created a supporter cohort? What would it look like? How would it best benefit our objectives here and our unique strengths? And so we tried to figure out which youth demographics were likely to be influential and already have positive views of the United States, which actually is not that hard to find in Korea in terms of positive views. We have one of the highest positive approval ratings of any country anywhere in the world. But we really wanted to get young people who are on a track to success in some sort of international field that's relevant to the work that we're doing, and also are passionate about the United States, but might not have the skills already to go to that next level. And so essentially we created this new program where the team took 2 months to plan. We did no other programs, and this is all thanks to Dana J and her leadership at the time. The team did nothing else for 2 months, just did intense audience analysis and research, and figured out that a potential good audience were students who are going to enter international fields. Essentially, we get new lifelong partners if the program goes well, and they get a career boost in one of the most competitive job markets in the world. So it's highly attractive for both sides. And essentially what this program did was it led to an entire rethink of our American Spaces team. American Spaces teams, for those of you who are not familiar, typically in a lot of posts that I've been in, at least, they manage resources, they manage facilities. They'll do a few programs here and there, but really what their core competency is managing the relationships with our partners who host their own partner American corners, or whatever name your post has, and any sort of flagship American center. What they don't usually do is run big youth cohort programs like you would see in like YSEALI or Young Pacific Leaders or YALI. But instead, that's essentially what this team was proposing. And so we decided to do a full-on rebrand of our American Center Korea, which, as you can see from the top, this probably looks quite familiar to many of you. It's based on a library and technology model. It's based on this idea that people need access to books, they need access to the internet, and certain kinds of technologies that they might not be able to get on the outside. And so the real reason why they would come visit the embassy and learn more about the United States is to get access to these things. In Korea's case, they already have a lot of technology. They have, in many cases, have better technology than the US Embassy certainly does. And so we ended up trying to think, how can we create a space that really exemplifies this idea that this is the place to learn about the United States, to learn about our foreign policy, and to learn about diplomacy and international affairs. And so this ended up taking form in a lot of different forms. But essentially, what we did is previously and pre-COVID, we did a lot of programs on a lot of different topics. You know, there might be a music program, there might be some culture programs, there would be English programs, and all of these things kind of jumbled together based on different themes. And we decided, at least in terms of what the American Spaces team was going to do, is they were going to really go super narrow and super deep. So develop programs that were based on this theme of foreign policy and diplomacy. So we have talks like Diplomats in Action, where we have VIP visitors come in. This is our ultimate VIP, our ambassador, Philip Goldberg, giving a talk on the bottom left of your screen. We try to meld those with new technology. So we use interactive tools so that these talks are not one directional. We can actually get feedback from our participants at the same time. We have our cohort program, it's the ADH Academy program, I'll talk about in a second. And then also a big part of this is name recognition. If you're going to rebrand your space and the name and the concept of your space actually matters, you have to do a whole lot of promotion for it. And so on the bottom right, you'll see this is part of our name recognition. It's been a lot of social media, traditional media appearances, and then also we did a TV show. This is part of what was a 50-minute Korean language documentary about the public diplomacy section. If you want to see clips on there of me trying to speak Korean, you can find them on my LinkedIn. But it's been very fun, and it's really helped us to go from the American Center Korea that didn't have wide brand recognition to the American Diplomacy House, which is now known especially amongst university students. And so we created, as part of this rebrand, one of the key parts of this was we wanted to make sure that the right audience that we had identified was finding out about our events and coming and talking about them. And so we created this cohort model called the American Diplomacy House Academy. We shortened it to ADH so that it could fit on hats and all sorts of other cool swag. And the idea is that this is an annual program. It's long-term, it's 10 months long. It is a competitive entry process and some other features that keep students engaged. And it really helps us develop direct relationships with program participants. In previous programs that I've worked on, oftentimes these programs would be granted out to another organization to manage. The embassy doesn't have time, we're juggling a lot of different things. It's hard to prioritize. In this case, we wanted to build the direct relationship with these young people. We didn't want a grantee to be a middleman, to have that, to maintain that relationship. And so we actually work with very limited grantees. Most of this is done in-house. The only grantees we have are speakers on honorarium at times, but it's really important that we have these direct relationships, which makes it very low cost. This project essentially is just the money that we were putting into facilities that we had anyways, and staff time that we were going to use anyways. What it did make us do is focus our staff time on this program. And so that is the major investment. And of course, we use our American Corner Network, our American Diplomacy House and Corner Network as our primary venue. There's some key parts of this program that I think are quite unique and help in its success is that it's really long. It's 10 months long. It's a huge commitment for students who are busy doing other things. They have school, they have internships, they're juggling a lot of different things. This program is almost an entire year. They are with us for multiple semesters throughout this program, and they learn a lot throughout it. And we think that's part of the reason why it's so successful. It's also exclusive. When we did audience analysis, one of the things that came to mind for young people was that embassies are exclusive places, and young people want exclusive experiences, especially when it comes to social media and bragging to their friends about the cool things they get to do. Meeting diplomats is rare. Getting mentored by diplomats is rare. Going to a US embassy is rare. And so by combining all of these things, we were able to create an exclusive program. It's also really competitive. This program gets around, depending on the year, 3 to 4 times the number of applicants that we have slots. We have a long application process. We read that down in the embassy, and then we do group interviews for just the top candidates. And then only a select few are actually let into the program, which runs from September to June. And the programs that we offer that we think provide value to our program participants, they range the gamut. But we have what we call core programs and sort of electives. It's kind of like you're in school again, because we wanted to create a format that young people were already familiar with. So we have master classes to learn different kinds of diplomatic skills and to hear stories from our senior officers about different things that they've encountered in their career. We have diplomacy simulations that are based off of curriculum developed by the American Museum of the Museum of American Diplomacy, or Harvard. We have foreign service officers who actually mentor students in different groups as part of that smaller groups from that larger cohort, and stay with them for the entire 10 months. We also offer students the opportunity to host their own event. So this event that you see at the top is actually from the third Summit for Democracy that was hosted here in Seoul just a couple months ago. And so that was actually run 100% by students, and it was the key youth event at the summit. So they got a lot of FaceTime. They worked with us for a long time, many calls and many planning sessions to get them there. But it was really their event, and they got to own it and talk about what they wanted. So we really feel strongly that this is a omnidirectional conversation we're having with young people. It's not just about us telling them what we have to say. It's also, we want to listen, and we want them to tell the rest of Korean society as leaders, as part of this leadership academy. Another facet, and I'll end in a second, that we think is quite interesting about this program is that there's a leadership and a credit system. So we actually designate a president and a vice president of this program, and individual team leads and deputy team leads of smaller groups. First year we ran this program, we had 150 participants. The second year we had 100. This year we're going to have somewhere between that. And by chopping it up into smaller groups, it keeps it manageable. It also, the team leads and president, vice president helps to get student buy-in and helps to keep the groups accountable. And that's because we have a credit system. So we wanted to make a program that was valuable for people, and that meant something. Getting in means something, and then graduating also means something. And so we actually have a minimum number of credits that young people our participants have to complete in order to graduate from the program and be accepted as alumni. We aim for about 70-30 pass-fail on the program. So if we have 100 students who come in, we expect that only 70 of them are going to make it in as alumni. And the reason why is we wanted it to be valuable. We didn't want anyone to phone it in. We make sure that these programs are accessible. They're scheduled during times that students have free time, so during their breaks, nothing during their exam time. But we did want to make sure that it does take some effort, because we thought that would help to build the community and sustain it over a long time. And I'll end by saying this program, I could talk about it until it's 1 o'clock in the morning where you are. But I have limited time. And so if you only take away one thing from this talk, these kinds of cohort programs have lasting impact, and really helped us to create other kinds of programs. When we saw that our first year alumni were active as ECA alumni, that they were continuing to amplify our messaging on social media, and that they were becoming staffers at the National Assembly and getting into the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we realized that we were onto something in building this network. And so we've actually used this cohort model to create other programs, like one that we're going to launch very soon, if all goes according to plan, called the Young Trilateral Leaders Network, which is very much it's an idea that's very much based off of this methodology, but adapted to a trilateral US, Korea, and Japan context, based on some of the outcomes from Camp David. And so we have similar programs for young women throughout the country. We're also doing a program on AI. This cohort model is really flexible in that it allows us to build really what we're supposed to be doing, in my estimation, is build long-term relationships and help the embassy identify those future IVL peers, those future politicians, those future diplomats, and really keep them as our good friends for as long as we can. So thank you so much. If you have any questions about this, please feel free to reach out. We also wrote a cable on this program. I have much more to say about it, but in short, I just really wanted to thank PDCA and all of the other sponsors of this program, this award. We're all very thrilled and humbled to have our work recognized, and we wanted to share our appreciation. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. Ambassador Gautam Rana nominated the public diplomacy section at the embassy in Slovakia, headed by PAO Tamara Sternberg-Greller. He noted that the section was able to introduce the United States to a segment of Slovakia that is highly skeptical of the US and to move the needle on public opinion during the year in which we celebrated the 30th anniversary of US-Slovak bilateral relations. Over to Bratislava.
Hello, and let me see if I can get my slideshow up. Sorry, I was trying to get it running and it was going out on me because our internet connection is not fantastic. Thank you all for having us here today, and thank you very much to the Public Diplomacy Council of America for the award, and thank you to our ambassador for his nomination. It was really very kind of him. I'm joined here today by our Cultural Affairs Officer, Ben Cohen. He is also online. And I also saw that some of our local staff signed in. This is a group award. It's a team award for a reason. Everything that I'm going to tell you here today was an absolute team effort, could not have been done without every single person who contributed to its success. And I was honored to be able to lead this team of 14 to go through and to basically produce what ended up being two very large public campaigns in support of Slovakia's 30th anniversary of independence, as well as the 30th anniversary of US-Slovak bilateral relations. So we call it Showing Up Are the Final 3 Feet as a nod to Edward R. Murrow's final 3 feet, that the greatest impact that you make is when you show up in person. And that's actually what we have found here in Slovakia. So let me give you a few facts about Slovakia before I get started. We are on the border with Ukraine. As you can see, all the way over to the eastern part of the country. It's directly across the eastern border from Košice, Slovakia's second largest city. What this means is that Slovakia found itself in a very fairly precarious position after Russia's reinvasion of Ukraine in February of 2022. Slovakia is also an outlier, both within the EU and also within the Visegrad 4, which is the other subgroup that it belongs to. It is the only V4 member on the euro. What that means is that it does not have complete control over its own fiscal policy. And this plays out in many different ways, including wildly variable inflation rates, which have deep impacts on the population. It has an education system, which is fantastic through high school, and then somehow drops off before you get to university. In the latest US News and World Report, the top university in Slovakia was 639th in the world, and it was 256th in the EU. So what this means is that you have a huge problem with brain drain. You have young, talented people who, when they get to university age, they look around and they think, well, I'm either going to get a job somewhere else, or I'm going to leave. I'm going to take advantage of Erasmus and I'm going to get out. And I'm going to go someplace else and I might not come back. There's also a fairly large urban-rural divide, and I use that term loosely because Slovakia's largest city is Bratislava, which is 550,000 people. As I said, Košice is its second largest city. It's about 270,000. But even so, it's about 50-50, and you see the same sorts of divides between urban and rural populations here in Slovakia that you do in all sorts of other places along, across the world. There's a very real sense of people being left behind. And in the 30 years since the fall of communism, there's a disappointment that has sort of taken root in part of the population, where even though when you look across by every economic indicator and measure, Slovaks are doing better today than they were 10 years ago, 15 years ago, but the disparities are much greater. So, let's say in 1985, you might be a dentist and your neighbor might be an electrician, but you're both going to vacation in the same place. You're both going to live in the same type of apartment, and your kids are going to go to the same types of schools. Not so today. Today, you might be living in the same apartments, but maybe your dentist friend is suddenly getting to go to Morocco and you're not. So there's a very real sense of this divide that has grown and grown. And as we approached the 30th anniversary in 2023, we were keenly aware of it. The other thing that's very important and probably the key in this equation is that the United States is not liked in Slovakia. We enjoy the lowest approval ratings in Europe. Well, I shouldn't say that. Sometimes Bulgaria is lower than us, sometimes Romania, but really we are always in the bottom 3. Generally speaking, our approval ratings are somewhere between 22 and 30%. I believe we're currently somewhere around 27. And this usually shocks people because you go across the border to the Czech Republic, you go across the border to Poland, even into Hungary, and you'll find approval ratings upward of 60, 65%. So the background upon which we do our public diplomacy work is actually quite challenging. And as we looked at 2023, we were neck and neck with the Russians in terms of the Slovak population viewing us as a threat. Polling showed that 49% of Slovaks saw us as a threat and 54% saw the Russians as a threat. Also, there was a statistic that came out that somewhere upwards of 65% of the Slovak population felt that the United States was dragging Slovakia into a proxy war with Russia over Ukraine. So very challenging environment. And we realized that we needed to do something to start shifting public opinion, but we also understood that online and in the newspapers was not going to be the place to do it because we are not the most trusted voice in the room. Who is the most trusted voice, you might ask? That would be the Germans. The Germans consistently poll 50% in that neighborhood or upwards. So when we looked at what we were going to do, our choices were partner with people, which we did, go out and meet people in person, which is what we opted to do, or else find third parties through which to deliver our message. What ended up happening was sort of an amalgamation of all three. And what we did when we were looking at how we wanted to construct our 30th anniversary campaign was we started with polling. We did some focus grouping. We employed an academic research institute out of Comenius University to go across and basically talk to young people and old people. We sort of grouped them into two separates, I should say, young people and seniors across the country to find out where the United States lay and also where NATO lay. Because as an interesting blip, in 2023, NATO's popularity in Slovakia fell to 58% from a 72% it had enjoyed immediately after Russia's reinvasion in February of 2022. We're now back up this year to 69%. So it was an especially low year for NATO. So we looked at those numbers that Comenius University pulled together for us. We cross-referenced them with GlobeSec polling, which comes out once a year and is probably the gold standard here. And we also looked at COVID vaccination rates because we had found that anecdotally, there was a correlation between lower rates of vaccination and, shall we say, anti-Western sentiments. The Russians have taken advantage of all of this. The Russian embassy in Bratislava is the most prolific embassy online, certainly in the EU, but the AI and data scraping agency that we employ believes it is in the world. As an example, between January of 2022 and January of 2023, the Russian embassy Facebook page had over 5,000 posts. Facebook is the most used social media medium in Slovakia. Over half the country has an account. By comparison, we posted 451 times in that same time period. Still extremely prolific, but nowhere near. And the Russian embassy isn't posting, like policy articles. They're posting everything from borscht recipes to photos of Siberia to, whatever, plus then policy interspersed, but they're flooding the space. They know that Slovakia is contested space. It is contested space online. It is contested space in terms of disinformation, and it is contested space in terms of the population. So when we took all of this and we put it together, we decided we needed to go out. We needed to leave the capital, the Bratislava bubble, as we call it, and we needed to get out and we needed to actually show America's face across the entire country. And actually, one day, I was in a car ride with one of our locally engaged staff. His name is Lajos Szabo, and I wish he was online because he really is the architect of the American Days campaign. And I said to him, what would be great if we could throw an American fair, if we could just get out there and we could show people across Slovakia a really fun side of the United States. And he looked at me and he said, what would an American fair entail? So I basically took him through the San Diego County Fair, which was the last time I had been to a county fair. And I told him you know, everything from the cornhole to the food to the music. And 3 weeks later, he brought me a plan. And he said, what if we were to do this? Except that instead of engaging local musicians, let's try for a military band. And again, remember, this is when NATO was enjoying popularity of around of just over 50%. So I thought that was brilliant. Way to show a softer side of the military. Really good, really good. So we pulled together a whole plan on how we were going to show a different side of the United States across the country. And how we picked the places really came down to the polling that we had done, the look that we had taken at the COVID vaccination rates, and the GlobeSec trends. And we basically cross-referenced them, and we picked places that didn't like us. We picked places that didn't like us and that had a body of younger people, so mostly university towns. And that is how we actually set our plan in motion. On the traveling exhibition, which is part 2, the way that we picked the places was that we looked at where we were not going for the American days, which were huge and overarching, and we decided, okay, there's a couple of other places that we would like to show a different side of the United States. And there we were not bound by needing to have a quorum of students, because the other part of the American days is that we really wanted to showcase our exchange programs. And so we picked different cities that also had, should we say, very low opinions of the US. And this is what we decided to do. And the traveling exhibition, the way that we chose it was, we decided that we should showcase the ties that were on a more person-to-person level between Slovakia and the United States. And what better way to do that than by people that are shared between our two countries. So we picked 30 notable Slovak Americans for 30 years, and we built an entire exhibition around these people. And then we took it across the country. And in every single place, we made a point to get out there to meet the mayor, to meet the local press, to bring a class of school kids, preferably middle school, so 10, 11-year-olds, to show them different personalities that combined the histories of our two countries. And we took great pains to showcase not just the historical figures, but also people that we thought our audiences might find interesting. We have people from the sports world. We have Zdeno Hara, who was the Boston Bruins captain. We have people from the realm of space. Eugene Cernan was the last man on the moon. We have people from the world of science. Ruzhana Bagji is an amazing professor at UC Berkeley, all the way through. And we picked men, women, people from different backgrounds. It was harder than you might think. Slovakia is a very homogenous country for the most part, but we were able to draw from a vast well. And in fact, we found out a lot about Slovakia in doing our research. One of the most interesting facts is that one of the first silent film stars actually was Slovak from a Roma family. So we felt privileged to be able to tell these people's stories. And it was actually great fun to pull together that presentation. So, American Days, we ended up going across 9 cities. In each place, we saw upwards of 2,000 people. So we figure about 20,000 attendees. And we know that between all of the media that we did, the N2 factor, plus the social media numbers, we reached about 500,000 people. Slovakia only has 5.5 million people, so we're talking about 10% of the population. And as we went across the country, we heard the most phenomenal stories. We were lucky enough to work with multiple partners. I mentioned our exchange programs earlier. So we worked with Fulbright, we worked with Flex, which is the Futures Leaders Exchange of America program, largely targeting, I would say, post-Soviet and post-communist countries, but basically takes high school students and sends them to the US for a year. And in Slovakia, we get over 600 applications for 12 spots. So it is definitely a program that's in demand. Plus our summer work travel, which is a program where we send university kids to the US for the summer to work as a college kid would, scooping ice cream or in national parks or whatever. Plus we were lucky enough to partner with Whirlpool and McDonald's, as well as a VR company. And we actually underscored our partnership with NASA and the GLOBE program through it was a traveling planetarium, which was extraordinarily cool. Plus, of course, our military partners. So this is what they looked like. I put in one, which was us in a mall because it was our rain plan, and it very much was Tiffany in the mall a la 1985, but it worked out swimmingly. And you can see in the top right-hand corner, that is one of our military band members, and she is singing there. We actually partnered with two military bands. One was the U.S. Air Force Europe Rock Band, and one was the 101st Airborne. And in all cases, the music was very well received, and we were concerned in some places that we might run into problems because of the uniforms. But truthfully, we didn't have nearly as many detractors or protesters as we thought we might. We did have a few, and in fact, we ran into some problems in southeastern Slovakia. But aside from that, really everything went over swimmingly. And without fail, we heard from people across the country, we can't believe you came here. We can't believe that the U.S. Embassy wanted to come to our town to put up this fair. Look at all the trouble you've gone to. We had one man who actually came up to us and said, you know, I wish my father had seen this. He died in 1988, but he always used to say to me, oh, those Soviet soldiers marching across with their guns and their uniforms and terrorizing us. And I wish he could see that we have Americans here now, also in uniform, but with guitars and not guns. And when he said that, I still, the hair on the back of my neck goes up, because you realize that you're reaching people, and you're reaching people in a way that nothing else really can. And then on the traveling exhibition, as I said, it was 30 notable Slovak Americans for 30 years of relations. We went to 8 cities, and actually the first city we started in outside of Bratislava was Prime Minister Fico's hometown. And we were not 100% sure what our reception would be, but the reception ended up being fantastic, and people without fail, once again, were interested, even in places that were not, shall we say, predisposed to like the United States, or where we would hear from people, well, you know, the US policy XYZ, but not you, not your embassy, not this. This is great. And we heard from teachers across the country, you know, this is the exhibition. It's so wonderful for us to be able to come and show our students this shared history. And in the photo with Ambassador Rana there in his hockey jersey, this is he was gifted that by the hockey team in Košice, and he's actually talking to a group of school kids who are off photo, and they were absolutely rapt. And you can see Ruzhina Bagji's face there in the background. And then in the bottom, I'm speaking to the mayor of Michalovce, who not from a party that likes the United States, and he himself not a person that has ever professed to like us. And you can see I'm pointing out Paul Newman, one of the, I would say, stalwart shining examples of shared US-Slovak history. And what we found with this traveling exhibition was that it brought history to life in a way that people had not expected. It introduced people to parts of their own history that they did not know existed. One of the most touching stories, actually, is a translator who worked with the, well, I would say it was a precursor to MI6 and also with the OSS in World War II on the Slovak National Uprising. She was a school teacher who decided that she no longer wanted to do that. She wanted to go and she wanted to support her country's efforts to combat the Nazis. And you have to remember, this would have been in 1944, Slovakia was actually an Axis power. So this was fighting against massive forces. And she joined the partisans in the forest and the US and British forces, and she was their translator. And she got them across enemy lines through some very close calls. And actually she was out basically scouting the front lines when the rest of their party was found and then put to death at Mauthausen. She escaped with 2 soldiers, one British, one American, and eventually made her way to the United States in 1952, where she ended up getting married and lived the rest of her life until she died in 2009. And she was awarded the Bronze Star by the US Army for her actions during World War II. And this is a story that most Slovaks don't know. And it's one that we were incredibly proud to tell as part of this exhibition. So the combination of these two really not only got us out, not only got us across the country, but it touched people in a way that we had not expected. Frankly speaking, it touched us in a way that we had not expected. And I can say that when we look at the polling for this year, well, now only 41% of Slovaks see the US as a threat. So we've seen an 8% drop. Is it us? Is it the war in Ukraine? Is it the news that's going on? I don't know, but we'll take it. We will absolutely take it. So that is how we chose to celebrate the 30th anniversary. We felt very honored to be able to get out there, to speak to all these people, to show Slovakia a softer side of the United States, to introduce our exchange programs, to showcase the military and a different side of the military, and also to be able to really celebrate these 30 incredible people for 30 years. We think that when we look at all of the polling numbers and everything else, we do think it actually did make a difference. We do think it actually did shift the needle. It was not something that we necessarily were expecting. It was something, of course, we were hoping for, but it's something that we're all very, very proud of. Huge effort. Every single one of those stops took multiple people, multiple days, and months of planning. But in the end, it really was all worth it. So once again, thank you for the award to PDCA. Thank you to Ambassador Rana for the nomination. And most of all, thank you to my amazing and incredible team for really taking what was sort of a one-off idea on a long car trip and turning it into something that was amazing. And if you have any questions or concerns, please follow us, Facebook and Instagram. It's up on your screen, or you can always send me an email.
Okay, I think that finishes our presentations, which were absolutely amazing. We have a Q&A box. We're running really tight on time. We wanted to kind of keep this to 1:15 just because everyone's got to get back to work. And I apologize for that. I almost feel like scheduling a separate session for Q&A because I personally have so many questions. And just have learned so much. I mean, who knew about Slovakia? It was where Senator Pell, the Pell Grant, started his PD career. I know that. But anyway, just a great presentations by all of you. I'm going to just take moderator privilege and ask one question to each of you, and no long answers because we really have to get off in about 5 or 6 minutes. What was the #1 challenge that you faced doing your project? And let's start with Wren.
I'll give a real simple and seemingly inconsequential answer, but the inability to share documents and collaborate on documents across the U.S. government in 2024 is really shocking, and is a problem that I think is larger than people think it is.
Wow, great answer. Yeah, I would agree with that. Patty.
I think one of the challenges that we're facing is related to language. We have worked with Haiti to provide us with content in Creole, but as we're seeing numbers of migrants from other countries, that is still a challenge. And how are we going to be able to message all of those communities?
Great. Josh?
We face many challenges, but if I had to pick one that sort of sticks out that we're still dealing with is, what do you do when we might have the opposite problem of Slovakia? Like, we're too popular sometimes. What do you do when all of a sudden you announce a program and then you've got hundreds of thousands of people looking at your content and asking questions about it? And you have these students who are really engaged, asking questions about their programs and their credits and things like that. That's been the biggest challenge, is just sort of like the scope of our outreach grew a lot because of this program.
Sort of information overload
Yes.
for the embassy. And Tamara.
I think we faced probably our 2 top challenges were, one, money. Unfortunately, State Department budget keeps shrinking, and so our resources, you got to do a lot more with less, and that becomes more and more difficult. It's part of the reason we actually went into partnership with Whirlpool and McDonald's, because they were able to do some stuff with us, you know, sort of like they basically contributed their services. So that helped out a lot, and it saved us quite a bit of money in the long run. And I would say the other challenge that we have, I mean, aside from the overarching challenge of not being very well liked here and getting the message out, is that Slovakia is actually a very large country physically, with a small population and a somewhat challenging infrastructure. So getting anywhere takes a very, very long time. So anywhere you go, you have to factor in travel time. And if you're going to Košice, the second largest city, it's 6 hours from Bratislava. Doesn't matter how you slice it. Road, train, air, doesn't matter. So with everything that you do outside the capital, it's not just an investment of money, but it's a huge investment of time. And especially as you look at staff time, and we're a small embassy, that can really take its toll.
Yeah, great. We have a question from our former president, Sherry Miller, and this is directed for Patty, and she asked Patty, she says there's been a lot of reports of Chinese migrants crossing the border, and we're wondering whether you've seen any. You've talked about Haitians. Have you also seen Chinese?
As I mentioned, the world is facing historic levels of human mobility. We have seen recent data from U.S. Customs and Border Patrol indicating a notable increase in arrivals from Chinese migrants and Indian migrants nationwide. I believe the latest number for this fiscal year was 48,500 encounters for Chinese and over close to 50,000 for Indians. We have collaborated with the U.S. mission in India to exchange best practices on migration messaging. And we hope that we can work with the other missions and in trying to communicate better with these communities.
Great. Maybe if we could share documents, it would be a little easier. I would say if I were running R, and I did want to mention that R is going to put the recording, they're going to distribute it tomorrow. But if I were running them, I would bring back all of you back to the States and have you lobby Capitol Hill for more money, because I think these are amazing projects. And again, I think Tamara is really right. They cost a lot of money, and the budget for PD is pathetic. I mean, when you look at it, it's probably not even the cost of one F-15 bomber. That's what I'm guessing. I just think you're great. I did want to close the program by turning it over to Ambassador Wallers himself, someone who's done a lot of work in PD, whose daughter was a PD officer. So Larry, are you with us? Great, good to see you.
Good to see you. I am not in a suit and tie today. I'm happily retired, but such a fascinating discussion. It was really exciting to see the sorts of things you're doing, and it reminds me at a 30,000-foot level, the kinds of challenges you face and the way you think about them are not that different from what they were 20, 30, 40 years ago. But when you come down to a ground level and then see the types of innovation, the types of thinking, and the persistence with which you're approaching these things, it was really, really quite inspiring. So thank you for being with us today, telling us what you are doing, and for the work you're doing. It's just really amazing. And that is a quick segue as we run out of time. 2 weeks from today, on June 17th at 1 p.m., we will be hosting Paul Kuchowski, the director of Undersecretary's Office of Policy Planning and Resources, also known as RIPPER, for a talk entitled Public Diplomacy in 2034. Now, looking at what are the continuing demands for an evolving public diplomacy approach. And I think it'll be a fascinating discussion, and it will really be building on and echoing the kinds of things that you folks have been doing. So for those of you who are in DC, this is a hybrid program. You can sign on our website, but will also be available virtually as well. So really encourage you and pass the word. I think this is going to be a really exciting program, and very much building on what we've been hearing from you folks this afternoon. So thank you very much. Joan, is that it, or
Yes, I think that's it.
Hit
Larry, you're the
the lead
final
button.
speaker, and congrats to all of our winners. And join the Public Diplomacy Council if you would. We'd love to have. Well, we're always looking for active members,
Absolutely.
and we'd love to have you contribute your thoughts. And we're a pretty big network of people. So I'll look forward to hearing from you guys. Thanks a bunch. Bye.
Thank you.